Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Let's get started and let's look at topic number 1, AFSPA reimposed in 6 riot-hit areas of Manipur. What is happening in Manipur? That is something that we discussed yesterday. But today, this newspaper article talks about the reimposition of AFSPA in the riot-hit areas of Manipur. But what is this AFSPA? Who can impose it? What is this disturbed areas? And where AFSPA is imposed currently? That is something that we will understand from this lecture. But listen to me carefully. There is a particular area where there is a lot of disturbance. You bring in the police or the paramilitary forces to control the situation. Now, the police is trained differently. The police, in order to bring the situation under control, may resort to lathi charge, may resort to firing in the air, may resort to water cannons, may resort to rubber bullets, pellet guns, and in extreme situations may resort to firing as well, but in order to injure these people who are violating the law and order. And in rarest of the rare cases may also shoot to kill, because the police is trained differently to manage civilian protests, to manage the law and order breakdown because of the civilian population. But army is not trained like this. The basic purpose of the army is to fight wars and defeat the enemy. So you are trained only in one way, which is shoot to kill. But imagine a situation where there is a disturbance in a particular area because of some disturbances internally, because of the local population. And the state administration, the state police is unable to bring the situation under control, is unable to maintain this internal disturbance or quell it, and then you bring in the army. Don't you think you need to provide some special powers to army to maintain internal situation? Because the state administration has been inefficient in dealing with the situation. That is the purpose of Armed Forces Special Powers Act. In Northeast, for example, right after the independence of India, there was a lot of insurgency, turmoil, chaos, particularly in the hills of Assam, which were inhabited by the Nagas. Manipur then was a union territory. And this is when an ordinance was promulgated in the year 1958 called Armed Forces Assam and Manipur Special Powers Ordinance. And this ordinance was later replaced by a bill. And then when that bill was passed, it became Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Under this act, there is a power to declare an area as a disturbed area. But who has the power to declare an area in a state as a disturbed area? That can be an important question for your prelims exam. This power is given to the central government. This power is given to the governor of a state. This power is given to the administrator of a union territory, and this administrator can be an administrator, a lieutenant governor, a chief commissioner, so on and so forth. So the power to declare an area in a particular state as the disturbed area, this power is given to the center as well. This power can be exercised by the governor of that state, or if it's a union territory, by the administrator of that union territory. But there can be a question on your mind. Sir, if the government declares a particular area as disturbed, does that mean there is absolute discretion on part of the government to declare any area as disturbed? For that, we need to understand some important cases. For example, Inderjeet Barua versus State of Assam in 1983. Supreme Court said, yes, the governor has the power to declare any part, any area of Assam as disturbed area. But while declaring an area as disturbed, that does not mean you can make an arbitrary decision without any logic, without any basis, which means the court emphasized the power of judicial review. If the exercise of this power by the governor in declaring an area as a disturbed area, if it is done arbitrarily, the court will have the power to strike it down, because judicial review is part of the basic structure of the constitution. But you will be able to understand that if it is in Manipur, and because of the chaos in Manipur, which we discussed, the reasons of which we discussed yesterday, if AFSPA has been reimposed in some areas in Manipur, it is not the arbitrary imposition of AFSPA, because the situation merited it, demanded it. Further, can you declare an area as disturbed for an indefinite period of time? No. Why? Because the court said in Naga People's Movement of Human Rights versus Union of India in 1998 that there has to be a periodic review. Once you have declared an area as disturbed area, you need to review the security situation in 6 months, every 6 months, to see whether you need to further continue this area as the disturbed area. But once an area has been declared disturbed, then AFSPA is applicable in those disturbed areas, which means the prerequisite of imposing AFSPA in a particular area is that that area should have been declared as disturbed. So the precondition to impose AFSPA in a particular area is that this area first should have been declared by the central government or by the governor or by the administrator of a union territory as a disturbed area. And then when AFSPA is applicable, then there are some special powers available with the army. And which are these special powers? Army can shoot to kill if there is a suspicion that that particular individual was carrying arms, ammunition, or is a terrorist. Army can arrest somebody even without a warrant. Army can search a particular premise even without a search warrant. Army can destroy what it believes is a dump which is storing arms and ammunition. So wide-ranging powers are given to the army because this is a peculiar situation, a special situation which merits intervention by the army because the state administration is incapable of managing the internal situation, the internal security of that area. And that is where army has these special powers. It can shoot on mere suspicion as well. It can arrest somebody on mere suspicion as well, without a warrant. It can search a premise without a warrant. All these are the special powers given to the army. But once an individual has been arrested by the army, there is a requirement that you should produce this arrested individual before the nearest police station. Just like if you are arrested today by the police, it is mandatory for the police to produce you before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours of your arrest. But since this is a special power given to the armed forces, you arrest somebody even without warrant, but you have to produce this arrested person before the police. But in how many years, how many months, how many decades, that is not specified in the law. Because the law says with the least possible delay. And this term, with the least possible delay, is also vague and may be liable for misuse as well. But the point is, once this person has been arrested, the special power is that you have to produce this arrested individual with the nearest police station, but with the least possible delay. But looking at these provisions, you may also assume or think that these provisions can also be misused. That means army, by exercising these special powers, may kill innocents. In such a situation, should there be some avenue provided under this law that those who misuse this law should be also be prosecuted? This is where the law says there is protection for those who act under this act. Protection for those who act under this act means the army. Which means, yes, if you want to file a case against the army because you think they have violated the provisions of AFSPA, for that you need the prior sanction of the central government. And in this case, it is the Defense Ministry which gives the consent. And if you have been following our channel closely since the time we started this channel, you would recall that in September this year, in one of the Hindu newspaper analysis, we discussed that the Supreme Court quashed the FIR which was filed against 30 army personnel in Nagaland, because a couple of years ago, these 30 army personnel were accused of killing 13 tribals in Nagaland. The Supreme Court quashed this FIR. Why? Because the state government had filed this FIR without getting the prior consent of the Defense Ministry, because there is a special protection for the armed forces when they are working under this law. Without prior sanction of the central government, which is the Defense Ministry, no proceedings can be filed against the army. And when we look at this law, initially, this law was applicable in the entire Northeast. The year was 1990 that this law was imposed in Jammu and Kashmir as well. Armed Forces Special Powers Act for Jammu and Kashmir in 1990. When there was a problem in Punjab because of the Khalistani uprising in Punjab and Chandigarh, this law was also imposed. AFSPA was also imposed then, but it was revoked later on because the situation became normal. Chandigarh, because it's a union territory, that's why there is a special separate mention of Chandigarh. There was a time when this AFSPA was also imposed in Mizoram, but it was revoked in 1980s. AFSPA was imposed in Tripura as well, but it was revoked in, I think, 2015, in Meghalaya as well, but revoked in 2018, I guess. And as of now, AFSPA is under force in Jammu and Kashmir, in Arunachal. You never know what UPSC may ask. Which of the following states AFSPA is currently under force? This may be the question asked in your prelims exam. In Jammu and Kashmir, in Arunachal Pradesh, in Nagaland, in 4 districts of Assam. Although from these districts, the right-hit districts of Manipur, AFSPA was revoked in 2022. Now it has been reimposed in these right-hit districts of Manipur. So these are the areas under which AFSPA is currently in force. That brings us to the closure of topic number 1. Let's look at another idea column written in today's The Hindu newspaper, a 2024 election result that leaves many astounded. Why people in United States elected Donald Trump? That's their problem. What we as civil services aspirants should be concerned with is that the presidency of Donald Trump, how is it going to impact India? How is it going to affect India-US relationship? How this is going to impact the peace or war in the Middle East? How is it going to impact the Iranian nuclear deal, which United States unilaterally withdrew in 2018? How the policies of the new president is going to affect global trade? That's something we will have to focus on. But this column is particularly focused on why United States people elected Donald Trump. So we don't have to unnecessarily get concerned with this. But this column also raises one important issue, which may be of some relevance for our examination, and that is why we will discuss this column, but briefly. And I will highlight what is that important point that this article talks about. But very briefly, when it comes to US presidential election, Donald Trump has defeated Kamala Harris, and now Donald Trump will become the president of the United States again. But in one of his speeches, he has said that I may not be able to contest the election again unless and until you ask me to. Which means there is a ban. There is a bar on the terms of the US president. You can't be elected to the president of the United States office for more than 2 terms, which means total 8 years you can be the president of the United States. Although this was not originally part of the US Constitution, the 22nd Amendment to the US Constitution basically spoke of imposing this 2-term limit on the US president. Which means Donald Trump may be hinting that I will contest election again. For that, he would need to amend the Constitution. And that constitutional amendment needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. Whether that is going to happen or not, we don't know. But this gives you an idea of the mindset of this individual who is now assuming office. You might also be aware. I'm assuming you're aware. But if you're not, let me tell you. It seems that the population, the electorate of United States is misogynist. They have never had a female US president. Despite getting strong contenders in the form of Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris this time, the US electorate, it gives a sense, is misogynist in nature, that they don't want to entrust the responsibility of this office with a female. And hence, they are electing male after male. But that's another point. Another point. According to this article, Pew Research Center released a report according to which if there are whites in United States who are not graduates, that means who do not have the bachelor's degree, 63% of them favor the Republican Party, which means favor the Donald Trump, which means the education standard of an individual determines your political affiliation and your political choices. If you are not a graduate, if you don't have a degree, 63% of the whites, they associate themselves with the Republican Party, and only 33% would align with the Democratic Party. But we don't have to go into that. That is the internal politics of United States. We should not interfere. But the point is, there are individuals who capture political power, who become the presidents or the dictators by destroying the Constitution, by leading a violent revolt to capture political power. But that's not the only way in which authoritarians, dictatorial tendency people, they assume power. You can assume power through democratic means as well, through elections as well, through legitimate means as well. But after that, you destroy democracy by capturing institutions, by misusing institutions. This article speaks about what happened in Hungary, for example. Since 2010, through democratic means, Viktor Orban is the Prime Minister of Hungary, and it is argued that he is authoritarian in his outlook. He has diminished institutions, violated the freedom of press, is having dictatorial tendencies. So Mr. Viktor Orban captured political power in Hungary and is the Prime Minister since 2010. Not because he captured political power through violent means, but through democratic means. Similarly in Turkey, according to this article, President Erdogan is showing signs of dictatorial tendencies. So it is not necessary for dictators to come to power through violent or non-democratic means. Through democratic means also, you can come to power and then erode the democratic edifice of that country, which this columnist is talking about may also happen with Donald Trump. Otherwise, why would the people in the United States elect somebody like Donald Trump, who has been impeached twice, against whom there are criminal cases as well, a convicted individual? It seems that these are the qualifications for someone in order to become elected as the President of the United States. But be that as it may, the point that this article is raising is that now Donald Trump would have captured all the institutions in United States. He has the firm control grip over his party, the Grand Old Party, the Republican Party. He will have control over the Senate, which is the upper house. He will have control in the House of Representatives as well, when the midterm would be conducted after 2 years. And he is the President of the United States. So he would have captured all the institutions in United States. And not to forget, judiciary as an institution, because there are 9 Supreme Court judges in United States, including the Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court. 3 conservative judges were appointed by Donald Trump, because there you select a candidate to be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court, and you need that candidate to be ratified by simple majority in the Senate. When Donald Trump would have the simple majority in the Senate, that means every nominee of Donald Trump to the US Supreme Court would be acceptable, would be ratified. Although there are no vacancies currently, but some newspaper reports argue that there may occur 2 vacancies very soon. And then US Supreme Court will have the majority of the Trump-appointed judges. And I don't have to repeat in telling you what the US Supreme Court did when Donald Trump appointed another judge. And because of that, the Roe versus Wade, this landmark judgment, was rendered null. Long story short, US president will have control over his party, legislature, which is Senate and the House of Representatives, judiciary as well, and he is the president of the United States, so he will capture all the political power, and then he will go against the immigrants, he will go against the minorities, according to this article, and then dictatorial in his tendency, which some people argue is reflected by his choice of the Attorney General, who is known to be very rabid in his ideology. But be that as it may, towards the end, what this column talks about is something that is worthy for this examination, and that is why we discussed this article briefly. And what does this article say? Democracy is the rule by the people. Democratic participation is important. One of the most important aspects of democratic participation is voting. Voting is an important duty. Although it's not a fundamental duty mentioned in the Constitution, but it's an important duty that we as people will have to play. But if it's an important duty, what if you exercise this duty irresponsibly and elect those people who are unqualified, unworthy of important public offices? That means this democracy will then have a serious flaw when uneducated, illiterate, according to this article, mindless, uneducated lot will misuse their duty of voting and through that elect irresponsible, unwarranted, unqualified, unjustified, undeserving, unworthy people to highest public offices. This is where there is a flaw in a democracy. And on this flaw in a democracy, I have prepared one means-based question that I'm going to reveal at the end of this lecture. Clear? Let's look at one editorial from today's The Hindu newspaper, raising impunity. And this is related to the bulldozer justice judgment that was declared by the court a couple of days ago. We have discussed this yesterday, but very briefly, let me summarize it for you, those who are joining us for the first time. Bulldozer action or bulldozer justice or bulldozer Raj, which means that there is a communal disturbance in a particular area. There are people who are accused of participating in this communal violence. Administration comes into the picture, brings in the excavators and the bulldozers, and razes down the buildings, the properties of the accused, which some critics would argue goes against the rule of law, because the power to declare somebody guilty is with the judiciary, not with the executive. Even if you are declared guilty, no institution in this country has the power to raze down buildings of even the convicted individuals. But yes, if the building is an illegal construction, it has to be razed. But since there was a misuse or alleged misuse of this bulldozer action by the state governments in UP, in Assam, in Madhya Pradesh, Supreme Court day before yesterday invoked its plenary power under Article 142 and issued guidelines. And these guidelines are enforceable. That means if you violate these guidelines, if the administration violates these guidelines, then contempt of court action can be taken against those officials. This, the Hindu editorial says, this intervention may end arbitrary and targeted demolitions on part of the state. But what is more important in this judgment is the fact that the court has decided to make these officials accountable for their actions. Now listen to me carefully. In 2014, and that is why we are discussing this topic again, although we discussed it yesterday. In 2014, some of the ex-bureaucrats approached the Supreme Court and asked the Supreme Court, my lord, I think it was 2012 or 2014, let me check it, but either 2012 or 2014, the case is TSR Subramaniam. He was the former cabinet secretary. He, along with other ex-bureaucrats, approached the Supreme Court. Why? Two things. Number one, bureaucrats do not have security of term, in the sense that they may be appointed as district collectors, or they may be appointed as police chiefs or superintendent of police, but at any point in time they can be transferred, which means at a particular place they don't have security of tenure. This tenure should be fixed. If it is fixed, then it will lead to less arbitrary actions. It will lead to independence and a situation where these bureaucrats or public officials are doing their duty without any undue influence of the political class. Because I may be an honest public servant, but if the government is telling me to do something different, something illegal, something extra-constitutional, unconstitutional, I will abide by it. Otherwise, they will transfer me. So there is this unwritten directive that goes to a public servant. Minister orally calls or talks to these bureaucrats and get these things done, even if they are illegal, arbitrary, unconstitutional. And if they are not in a position to abide by the diktat, the directives of their political masters, they may be transferred. So TSR Subramaniam, long story short, argued for a security of tenure. And this is where the Supreme Court directed that every state and the center should set up a civil services board. And this civil services board should be responsible for transferring and appointing the heads of various institutes, various districts in a particular state, police, administration. And whenever, most importantly, whenever you are given any direction by the minister to a bureaucrat, it should not be an oral directive. You have to abide only by the written directive. Which means a couple of students yesterday reached out and said, sir, although Supreme Court has made it significant that if any public official would violate this order, then contempt of court proceedings can be filed against them. And at the same time, if they have demolished a justified building, which was not an illegal building, then you will have to provide money from your salary to bring this building back to life, to restore this building. How will this bureaucrat be in a position to do that? Because they abide by the unwritten orders of the executive. For that, you need to understand is that they don't need to listen to the unwritten orders of the political masters. Why? Because TSR Subramaniam judgment is clear, which directed the state and center to set up civil services board, and at the same time directed that these public officials should only abide by the written orders of the minister. So the minister is telling you, demolish this building, you say, give me in writing. Because that is according to the spirit of the TSR Subramaniam judgment. And that is what we needed to discuss, an additional point from this editorial, although not mentioned in the editorial, an additional fact, that's why we discussed it. Let's look at another column. Should India continue to boycott cricket in Pakistan? Some of you may also be preparing for the civil services examination interview. The results of the mains may be declared in December, and then you need to prepare, although you're preparing for the interview even now. And this can be a potential question asked in your interview as well. Should India continue to boycott cricket in Pakistan? Listen to me carefully. There is a saying that in India, state has the army. That means army reports to the political class in India. But in Pakistan, army has a state. It's the Pakistani army which decides, which determines who should become the next prime minister, who should control the political office in Pakistan. And it has been the policy of the Pakistani army to ensure that there is no peace between the two neighbors, India and Pakistan. That is why if you follow the trend, whenever the governments of India and Pakistan, they try to come closer through talks, through negotiations, through discussions, immediately afterwards, there is a big terror strike or there is a big military development taking place. If Prime Minister Vajpayee crossed the border, traveled to Lahore, then to Minar-e-Pakistan, and then this bus service was launched, it was followed up by the Kargil war by General Pervez Musharraf. Whenever government of India and Pakistan try to do something good, there is an attack such as the Uri, there is an attack such as the Pathankot, there is an attack such as 2611. So it is not in the interest of the state of Pakistan, which is the deep state, which is the army, to have good relations between the governments of India and Pakistan. That is why there were some people who were advocating, and listen to me carefully when I say this, that talks between India and Pakistan should be uninterruptible. Not uninterrupted only, uninterruptible. Why? Because whenever India and Pakistan will talk to each other, there will be the deep state of Pakistan, the Pakistani army, the ISI, and those proxy organizations, the terrorist organizations of Pakistan, which will try and create a situation that the talks between the two countries would stop because there is a terror strike. Because how can the government of India then convince its own population that we are still talking to Pakistan while Pakistan is killing innocent Indian civilians in India? That is why whenever there is a peace initiative, there will be some misadventure by Pakistani deep state to derail the peace initiative between the two countries. And that is why some people would argue that talks should be uninterruptible. So that even if some attacks take place, the talk should continue, because who is coordinating these attacks? That entity which does not want peace between India and Pakistan. Why? Because otherwise their kitchen would go to an end. They justify the massive military spending by saying that we are in a constant threat under India, from India. But be that as it may, after 2611 attacks in Mumbai, even the cultural ties between India and Pakistan has taken a hit. This is where Pakistani actors, singers, they were at some point in time not allowed to work in India, in Indian films. Initiatives such as one started by Times of India also got suspended, Aman Ki Asha. So the cultural ties also took a hit. But when it comes to cricket, which is one of the biggest sporting events, sports in both the countries, India as well as Pakistan, should cricket in Pakistan, should India continue to boycott cricket in Pakistan? Because we still play Pakistan. Pakistan visited India when last year Cricket World Cup took place. We play Pakistan when it comes to World T20 or Champions Trophy or One Day International Cricket World Cup. But the bilateral series between India and Pakistan in Pakistan has not taken place. Now the Champions Trophy, Cricket Champions Trophy, is scheduled to be held in Pakistan next year, February next year. And Board of Control for Cricket in India has officially communicated to the ICC, the International Cricket Council, that we are not going to travel to Pakistan. Why? These two individuals argue we don't know the real reason. If the real reason is security, then we can't commit. It's best left to the government to decide. But both of them, they also raise issue that if India can travel to Pakistan to play tennis Davis Cup, if Pakistani football team can come to India to play SAF Cup, If cricketing teams, blind cricketing teams of both India and Pakistan can travel to each other, then why can't India travel to Pakistan to play the Champions Trophy? If it is politics, they don't agree. If it is security, they agree. Because let's not forget that cricket cannot be equated to Davis Cup, tennis, or badminton, or football. Because the cricketing stars are international stars. They have much more visibility in Pakistan. They are much more popular, and they may also be under cloud. They may also be under the influence. They may also come under the attack of the terrorists in Pakistan. So their security is of paramount significance. And if the government has taken a stance that it is because of security that we don't want Indian cricketers to travel to Pakistan, it is best left to the government to decide. But if it is not security, according to these two individuals, then India should play Pakistan in Pakistan. Why? Because this can bring the two countries together, and at the same time, sports and politics should be kept separate from each other. What are the options then with Pakistan? Either it can still host the Champions Trophy, but then matches of India, and if India reaches the final, then that final should be played at a neutral third venue, which can be Dubai, which can be UAE. Or the other option is that Pakistan give up its right to host this Champions Trophy, and some other cricketing nation should host this Champions Trophy, such as South Africa. Or both the countries, India and Pakistan, they are adamant, and ultimately the loss is the cricket's loss. And it is going to be a big business loss for the ICC, because this is a money spinner for International Cricket Council. Let's not forget, when it comes to football, for example, the rivalry between Argentina and Brazil, you don't get to see Argentina play Brazil in the league matches. But these two writers, they say that there is something called group cooking, where you deliberately make India and Pakistan in the same group, so that India and Pakistan cricket match will fetch a lot of revenue in terms of ad revenue, TRPs, and even the cricket stadium match generating revenue. So there is group cooking, there is finance involved, and this finance would not let this Champions Trophy be jeopardized. So we may need to find a solution. But on this particular topic, I have prepared another mains-based topic, mains-based question, which again I'm going to tell you towards the end of this lecture. Let's quickly go through some of the focus prelims topics. The first is the basic countries asked nations at COP29 to honor commitments for climate finance. Can you tell me which are these basic countries? Brazil. We have South Africa. We have India. And we have China. So exclude Russia, BRICS becomes basic. Although in BRICS now we have other countries as well. This was launched in 2009. Why? Because it was done because of the Copenhagen Climate Summit. Which is known as COP15. And what is this COP's Conference of Parties? We have discussed a couple of days ago. So in 2009, these four big countries, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa, they decided to come together at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, which is COP15, which was meant to discuss what will be the future of the Kyoto Protocol. And they decided that we will come together and be united when it comes to the climate change negotiations. Because these big industrialized nations, they are the biggest polluters of the world. And now they are telling the developing countries that you should control pollution, you should not let the earth suffer. They have been the biggest polluters of the environment. And they are now developed. And they have the technology. And they want to keep us further poor, further less industrialized by imposing restrictions on us when it comes to the emissions. And for that, these rich countries, they have the important duty of funding climate finance. And now you would know that at Baku, there is a summit going on, which we have discussed a couple of days ago. Now, these 4 countries, basic countries, they're asking nations that you should honor your commitments, that you should commit to climate finance, to funding this climate finance. So for that, what is basic? When was it launched? Who are the part of it? And what was the context in which this group was created? Can be some important facts that can be relevant for your prelims examination. Let's look at another topic. No dual eco clearance for 39 category of industry. The Union Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. What it has done, it has said that there are 39 categories. Which are these 39 categories? 39 categories of industries. And these 39 categories of industries, they are primarily called that they come under white category. And what is this white category? It primarily means that they are least polluting in nature. Normally, what happens if you have to set up your factory, if you have to set up your plant, you need 2 important clearances. What is that clearance? First is environmental clearance. Second is CTE or CTO, which is consent to establish such a factory or a plant, or consent to operate such a factory or such a plant. The point is, if you have to set up a factory or a plant, you need first environmental clearance, and then you need consent to operate or consent to establish such a plant. Without these 2 clearances, dual clearances, you cannot set up your factory or a plant. Now, what Environment Ministry has done, because this was a long pending demand of some of these industries, for example, leather stitching industry, those industries which are responsible for, let's say, fixing the air conditioners or coolers, or industries such as brick kilns, those who manufacture fly ash bricks, even those which are manufacturing solar cells or modules. These are basically under white category, which means these are least polluting industries in nature. Why should they also go through this hassle of getting the environmental clearance and this consent to establish or consent to operate documents? Now, Environment Ministry, in a landmark move, has exempted 39 such categories of industries which come under white category, which are least polluting in nature, to opt for this dual clearance. Something else. There is something called pollution index score. And what is this pollution index score? If there is a plant or a factory, and by operating it, it is releasing air pollutants, water pollutants, or by operating it is also generating hazardous waste. Basis the amount of air pollutants released, water pollutants, hazardous waste generated, every group of industries is given a pollution index score. Which means if your pollution index score is up to 20, you come under white category. That means you are the least pollutants. If your score is 21 to 40, green. 41 to 59, it is orange. 60 or above, it is red. This exemption, dual clearance exemption, is given to only those industries whose pollution index score is up to 20, which means they come under white category, which means they are the least polluting industries. And this classification is done on the basis of, is done by Central Pollution Control Board. Clear? Let's look at two practice questions for mains, something that I told you right at the start. Number one, while democracy is often hailed as the most inclusive and participatory form of government, it is not without its flaws. Critically examine the inherent limitations and challenges faced by modern democracies, suggest measures to address these shortcomings. Second, sports and politics in India often intersect in ways that both benefit and undermine the spirit of sportsmanship. Critically examine the relationship between sports and politics in India, suggest measures to ensure the autonomy and fair governance of sport bodies. When it comes to question number one, what are the challenges that democracies, modern democracies, face today? Challenges such as populism. You take decisions which please the majority of the population, whether it is through policies, whether it is through economic policies. Even if it drains the state money. For example, the scheme for providing 3,000 rupees benefit every month to women in Maharashtra, which is considered to be a game changer when it comes to politics. Although there are others who say that it has put financial strain on Maharashtra. Populism. Cronyism. This nexus between bureaucrats, political class, and the businesses, so that the laws are tailored or rules are changed to favor the business class. That is another inherent flaw in modern democracies now, challenges that the democracies are facing. Third, voters' apathy. Voters simply don't care. And that is reflected in the declining voters' participation in politics in elections, the declining voter turnout rates. Another, for example, majoritarianism. This is another challenge. Another challenge means weakening of institutions. Challenge such as information manipulation, fake news, false news, misleading news. You can also write role of money and muscle power. These are some of the challenges that all the modern democracies face. And how do you negotiate with all these challenges? That will test the foundation of your democracy. That is it for today. If you understood all the topics that we covered today, do not forget to let me know in the comment section. Press the like button if you wish to. It won't take more than a second. And subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. See you again tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye. Take care.